All right, welcome everyone. So welcome to the first town hall we've ever done in the whole world. So the purpose of the town hall, as we thought about it, was really to get at some of the questions that you felt weren't answered or should have been answered, or maybe the thing we missed and we should have been talking about. So tonight is the town hall. So that means this is your time to tell us things, right? What did we miss? What are the questions you have? What didn't you understand? What is the strategy? What things are important to you? So we want to get started with those kinds of questions. So you've been sitting for a lot of days, and I'm sure many of you have tush fatigue, but we're not talking about that right now today. We can talk about that at another time. So what we'd like to think is ask the questions. What didn't we answer? What did we miss? So you have to be a little bit brave and get up. For the young men in the group, as teenagers, as young adults, what did we miss for you? What do you need? What could we do better? So can we think about some of those questions? We have lots of experts in the audience, so I'm going to facilitate the questions. You're going to ask the questions, and we're going to go from there. So who has the first question? This won't be a good town hall if no one has any questions. Huh? Excuse me? So, all right. Okay, let's divide it into topics. So this is, what do we see as the biggest barriers in this community? And this could be your biggest barriers at home, the biggest barriers in the community, the biggest barriers for you in life. What are the biggest barriers? No one? Come on.
Exactly what Duchenne's and muscular dystrophy is. The lack of knowledge and understanding of what this disease does, and trying to explain to the medical community what needs to be done for our kids, and much less the government officials and the school officials and everyone else. The lack of information that they have is always amazing. And as you know, we've been going through this for a long time.
Yes, we have. So Drew, is there one thing you think we could do to change that, or two things you think we could do to change that?
Well, my wonderfully intelligent wife and I were talking about this last night. We think that educating the pediatricians is a good place to start, because that's where the families start off, and they never really know where to send people after that. And it's just merely because they just a lack of understanding. They get, I think we were told they get maybe 1 week of muscular dystrophy in med school, and then they forget about it. So I think that just approaching the pediatricians and just tell them this is the care, this is where the care can be obtained, and this is what you need to do, and this is where you need to send the kids in order for them to get the best care possible.
Okay. Catherine, this light's shining here.
I think that's just a really great point, and we have seen this diagnostic delay in patients with Duchenne, and so if we could get our pediatricians to send out a CK when they see developmental delay or calf hypertrophy, that would really be a big boon to the community.
So when we did the website that is childmuscleweakness.org, that's a website that shows early signs, one of the things we tried to coin the phrase is developmental delay due to CK. So maybe we could start promoting that little phrase, developmental delay due to CK, and for that awareness for people who see their primary care docs. I'm not sure how to spread it widely, but we can certainly think about that. Can I ask you one more question? How much muscular dystrophy information did you get in medical school?
I don't think I got any in medical school.
How much did you get, Linda Gripe? Never. Okay, good to know. You give one lecture at Penn. Still at Penn or Gainesville? Okay.
I got one from Dr. Sweeney.
You did? And now Penn dropped it, so that's a bad idea. Question?
No, I was going to add on to that. What my son and I have done, we were recruited by Dr. Fan in Atlanta, who also gives lectures at Emory to med students, as we've gone and spoken and been the family example, the patient example for Duchenne when she's giving the talk about abnormal muscle development and neuromuscular disease. And what she has found 4 years later, somebody came up to her and said, I don't remember a word you said, but I remember Bobby. I remember him getting off the ground. I remember seeing and knowing, so that I know that when a patient comes in my office showing those signs, I'll know exactly what to look for. So I think that if we can go out and solicit and try to be able to also present, we presented to first years, but we also presented to residents. And just to be to have a visible example, have them walk a couple of stairs if they're able to get up off the ground, to do that and show them is going to stick in their mind, and that's what they have said. That sticks in their mind more than anything else.
How many people in the audience have ever done that? How many families have ever done that in a medical school? A couple of you have done it. So if you, wherever you live, I was going to say if you live somewhere, but that's probably not a good, that's probably not, hopefully you live somewhere. But if you live anywhere near a medical school, I think it is worth reaching out to them and saying, you know, give me 30 minutes for those new medical students, because I think it is true, like us, once we see that Gower, we remember it forever, right? Once we see the calf muscles and know what that's connected to. So if you have medical schools, that's part of what we can do, is go to those medical schools and talk. Another question, Brian.
So when I started coming to these conferences 20 years ago, this is remarkable to see the metamorphosis in.
Yeah, I think access is a big issue, and one we have to really address, so that these therapies, as they come online, are accessible to everyone. I think we also work with regulatory to make sure that the labels are broad, so the labels aren't just for a certain subset of individuals with the diagnosis, but it covers dystrophinopathy across, so Duchenne, Becker, whatever, and females with dystrophinopathy, so everyone has access to really drive these therapies forward and have a life that receives that benefit. Question? Question, okay. Need a little bit louder maybe, or a little bit closer? There we go. That's better.
I'm Colin Worth. To go off of what Brian was saying, I think one of the biggest barriers is insurance. So I know all of the boys and young men with Duchenne should be able to access therapies, and they should not be denied by insurance providers.
Yeah, thanks, Colin. I totally agree with you. Have you had trouble with insurance, whether it's services or equipment or other?
I have had some issues.
Yeah. And on equipment, did it take you a while to fight it and get the equipment you needed, or what was it? Can you tell me a little more about that?
It took me a long we actually had a hard time getting a Hoyer lift from insurance.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And why did they say no? Just because?
So we wanted to get a powered lift, and they said that was not medically necessary, I guess.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly what they said. So.
Yeah, I totally agree. We have to fix that. Okay. Question?
Not a question, just a comment regarding one of the barriers. One of the barriers I see playing out
Christine.
frequently. Oh, sorry. As we have certified Duchenne clinics, people are traveling. Some people can't, so they rely on their local clinic. We need to make sure that access to emergency care and standards of care are disseminated across the country, regardless of a certified clinic, and it's hard. I know we have a set of doctors on call that will speak to any emergency doctor, but some of that barrier is ego. We need to break those down so these kids get the best care across the country. And that's one of my biggest concerns as a parent with an older child. And I've put a local clinic, a local practice in place that he's seen, so they understand what he has, what his baselines are, and that's critically important.
Yeah, so I think there's nothing worse than going on a road trip and finding yourself in an ER in, I'll say Middletown, Ohio, because that's where I'm from, and it's in a rural area, and the ER probably doesn't know much about Duchenne, and trying to explain to physicians who may or may not listen to you about what might need to be done. So I agree that we need to think about those guidelines. We certainly have good resources on the website, and certainly stress dosing protocols, PJ's protocol, but I think we need to think a little more broadly about that. I think we have a question over here.
Just to add to what Brian and Colin said, access to public health benefits, so Medicaid in particular, Medicaid waiver programs. In New York State, there's an office that handles Medicaid waivers called the Office of Persons with Developmental Disability. And Duchenne muscular dystrophy is not on the list of diseases that result in automatic coverage. Most of the diseases are intellectual disability. I just find it very strange that an office that's named for persons with developmental disability does not have Duchenne listed as something that's, so you need to prove it by other measures that you have a developmental disability. And I just feel like that should be automatic, that should not be a barrier, and it basically increases the amount of time that you need to spend on the phone and with making more appointments to get more evaluations in order to prove it.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I know some parents spend days and days and weeks on the phone to get services, and I don't know if people in the audience like Mindy or Ryan or Annie want to comment on that and trying to get these things listed in Medicaid and CMS and other insurers. I don't know if anyone has a comment while we're on that topic. Mindy, you want to comment?
Well, the waivers run state to state, so we've got a big task there. Some states are better than others, but yeah, I think if we could get Duchenne included in, you automatically qualify for waiver services. The way it works now is if you meet a certain level of care, you can get some waiver services through like an aged and disabled scenario. That's not developmental delay, but you have to have a pretty high level of care in order to get those services, and that's like respite care, home health aides. Some states have thousands of dollars for van modifications. But you have to know the laws of your state. You have to get in touch with the agency and get assigned a case manager. And hopefully, at your home assessment, you never make it look like a good day when they come to give you an assessment. Answer the door, don't shower, don't pick up your house. Seriously, you don't want them to, I've got it all under control. Make it look like your worst day ever when they come and when they come into your home.
Yeah. No, I think, so for the audience, we have really wonderful people. Annie and Ryan work on these issues. Brian works with them. Little Hercules works on them. Marissa Penrod is working on them. So I think we're gathering evidence about how do we get this done and get it done better, easier, more quickly, because I think that's really critically important. Question over here?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was going to say, for example, in our state, I think they have to have a requirement of physical therapy 5 days a week in order to qualify, which is kind of difficult to manage. But on an aside, I think one of our barriers has been being in an area that the care for Duchenne in general is kind of missing and needing to travel for a care center, like they said. But we are in a DMD clinic, but it seems there's so much variance even within the community as to what somebody around us that isn't a certified care center says we should do versus that. So if there was more even consistency amongst all the DMD doctors in the communities and more.
Totally agree. Kathy Kinnett, you want to take this question? Where are you hiding?
Sure. So we do have network of providers that are across the country, and if any providers want to reach out to other providers that are in part of the CDCC network, we are more than happy to make those connections as well as help you get the information that's online to your neuromuscular providers who may not be at a certified Duchenne care center. I'm also 24/7 available. So if anybody has any questions that they need help with, I'm happy to help. There, can I talk about the AAP thing, the provider? So primary care, you were talking about getting information to the primary care providers. If everybody could tell their primary care providers that the AAP is just recorded and will archive information for primary care providers about Duchenne, as soon as those are posted, we'll send them out to everybody. And I would love if everybody's primary care provider and pediatrician watch those webinars. Really help.
Okay, question.
I was just going to make a comment about a biggest barrier. I think especially for our boys who are now men, is getting access to good quality caregivers and personal care aides that are reliable and, get paid what they deserve, because they're what provides the independence for our boys.
Yeah, I think that's such a big issue as well, right? To be able to provide appropriate care in your home, and I don't have a solution to that. I don't know if anyone else has a comment on that, but I think this is an issue of you pay the fees, or the hourly rate is so low that people really aren't interested, and we have to figure that out. The only thing I do know is Buddy Cassidy talked today about being in a situation where he found nurses, and I happen to think they're the best people in the world. So I think that if you live in that kind of environment and can make those connections, and if we could learn, that would be terrific, but I don't have an easy solution to that one. Terry.
I don't know if this was mentioned earlier. I was getting my merman out of the water, but regarding payers, when an approved treatment goes to a payer, that file needs to go to the proper department, the proper doctor. In our case, Billy's file went to a general internal medicine guy at Highmark. He had no clue what Duchenne muscular dystrophy was, and he admitted it to our hospital. So he said, this needs to go to a peds neurologist, or at the very least, a neurologist. He said, this is not my specialty. So, that caused the first denial. Of course, they're going to deny it anyway. But who's ever in charge of making sure that they're educated? Because these files are ending up in the wrong hands.
Yeah, Annie, do you want to comment on that one? Oh, well, that's a good comment, right?
Well, I'll just say, and I don't know, is Kelly here? Kelly Maynard. So there are some legislative efforts in states underway to do exactly what you're talking about, Terry, and we absolutely agree.
Question.
Hi, I'm Michael Counterman. I just wanted to bring up something about jobs, because I feel like there's a lot of people with Duchenne that aren't able to work as much because of the amount of money that they make. I know it's just, now with Duchenne, a lot of people are getting a lot of treatment, so guys with Duchenne are getting healthier and they're living longer, and they're able to work and get jobs. And a lot of them want to be able to work, but they're feeling like they only can volunteer, or they can only do part-time, because they like to give people who don't like to really do anything, they like to reward them, I feel like. And the people that have Duchenne that are able to work, that they kind of punish you for wanting to work, because they make you only get to work for 9 months, and then you only can make a certain amount for 9 months, and then after that, it depends on what state you're in, but after that, you can lose your services. You may have to get your own. You might have to get your own insurance.
Yeah, I think employment's hard, because you balance that out against the income you receive, right? And so if you make too much money, then you lose some of those services. However, don't you work for a company, Michael?
Yes, Solid Biosciences.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So this is a pitch for a raise as well. Just saying. Question over here.
I just wanted to ask a question back on the resource issue. I'd like to see a little bit more of, basically I want to know who to call when I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. Because I don't currently go to a certified care clinic, so I'd like to find out a little bit more about who should I go see. Because my neurologist is fine, but he doesn't really know anything. So I'm tired of being the expert. But just also in terms of things like from care resources to advice on medical tax deductions, things like that. I just like to see a little bit more of just who do I call when I have a problem.
Okay. I don't disagree with that. I think if we had a warm line or a hotline that could be utilized for questions about what does this mean, usually it's Kathy Kinnett Hotline X, right? But 24/7, even though we expect it, is not possible. And I think that as a parent being home and feeling that you have a question, or being a person with dystrophinopathy, you have a question, where do I go? And I think this is something that hopefully we can take on as a community. And I would guess, Christy, you have the same question sometimes. If Elizabeth says, I don't feel good, you're like, I don't know. I don't know what to do next. Do you find yourself in the same situation?
I mean, it's pretty much her call most of the time with that. Yeah, I don't have anything to say. She's extremely competent and generally knows what's going on, but it's still overwhelming, the number of things that we need to find resources for.
Yeah, I think the feeling that you're the expert or you have to be the expert is really, really a difficult situation. So you want to speak to that, Stan? Thoughts on that, what we could do? Here, Stan.
Yeah, I mean, I think I even rely on Kathy Kinnett for expertise sometimes, but yeah, I think there's definitely a need for a series of experts that can confidently answer questions. Oftentimes, many of the providers that are in this room open themselves up to answer questions, but it's an ad hoc network, and I think it also requires a bit of moxie. Again, you're really putting it on the patient to say, do you have the wherewithal to call Stan or John or any of the other people that are here in the room up around a relatively simple question that, if answered with confidence, gives the patients the confidence to move forward. And I think that's a desirable goal, to build that network, and I think we can do it. I think I would just comment that we don't do well for rare diseases in general in the U.S. for how we give health care, and we make it very difficult for everybody to get almost everything covered, and no insurance company is capable of reviewing adequately whatever your claim is in Duchenne. It just doesn't exist. You never get to an expert. They don't exist. And it's true across rare diseases. So I think maybe it is a little bit if we have to build that network outside of this, what our care enterprises are. So.
Thank you. Another question over here.
Hi. Hi. I think a barrier many families I know here have is that we don't live in the US, and we come from a country when there's nothing going on with Duchenne more than having corticoids and stretching and eating healthy. And we see all this treatment being done here, and it's so hard to get information. I know it's hard for people here in the US. Imagine people living outside the US. We're so thankful to you. We are lucky enough to be in a Sarepta trial now for 1.5 years. All the information we got it from Parent Project. And from people like Kathy Kinnett, we spoke like an hour over the phone. And Mr. Dr. Nelson. Yeah, I don't know if you remember, like 3 years ago, we talked over the phone for an hour, and you clarify what we could do, all these trials that were going on, but there was so little information, and we called when we decided to go with the Sarepta trial, we called different centers. There were like 15 centers doing, and one by one they were closing the doors to us until we get to the fantastic people at Gainesville and then the UF. Stephanie, if you're around there, we're here thanks to them. But it was really hard, and it's still hard. We're fighting for our visas. We're fighting for. Believe me, the U.S. is a great country in almost anything, but not in receiving people with medical problems.
Well, and we're not talking politics here, so there's that. So
that's a big barrier for many.
Well, yeah, and we're living here. But so maybe could I ask Doug to comment on international patients? And so it is tough, right? Because if you live outside the U.S. and you see these trials that were talked about, and it's just the thing you can't touch, right? It's just right there. And then you hear people in social media where we hear often results that aren't really results, but we hear comments about whatever. I mean, how do you get there? So, and I know as a company, I am certain that people come into your offices one after the other and say, can you fix this? Can you do this? How do you feel about that? How do you think about that? Can you shed some light on that?
So I'll just say briefly, it's a journey for us. So we're as I said on the stage yesterday, our goal is not to build therapies for the United States, but to build therapies for, all around the world. I'm glad to hear that you're in a trial outside the United States. Obviously, that's wonderful. It's still a work in progress for us, and the good news, at least as it stands now, is we've got folks in Europe, across Europe right now. We've got patient advocacy in Europe, as well as field-based folks in many of the countries in Europe. We've got, I think, at least a really strong group of individuals down in South America, primarily in Brazil, that are working. We've got sites up and running now for our exon skipping technology, and we'll have in our next trial sites up and running for our gene therapy as well when we get to our next study in gene therapy. And we're building right now. And so the information will begin to flow. We were fairly nascent, to be fair. 2 years ago, we were very nascent outside the United States and really weren't well connected. And we're at a different place now. I think we probably have 50 or so employees in Europe, and we've got a group of employees in South America. We'll have some employees out in Asia as well. In fact, we have a country manager in Japan right now, so we're really starting that process. But it's gonna be a journey for us. So you're gonna have to kind of walk with us on that journey, and the information flow will begin to increase over time. We had committed ourselves, although frankly it's been observed in the breach, to be entirely honest, that we were going to start doing some webinars. I think I did at least one ex-US, and we're going to start thinking about doing more of those so we can share more information and be more stitched together. But it's definitely a work in progress.
Yeah, but it's just, to be fair, and I understand that it's a work in progress, and I understand that for companies, and I don't know if any other company wants to comment on international patients, it's just really hard because, you have to move to this country if you're going to try to be eligible for a study, and then you have to stay in a gene therapy for a period of time after, and then, but it is that if-then, right? If you get into a study that, has a potential, and obviously wouldn't be in a clinical trial if we weren't hoping that there's some potential benefit, it's that if-then for people outside. If you're not, then we know the trajectory. So I think it's really hard. It's really hard to be on the outside looking in. So I'm glad for international studies. I'm anxious for more, and I think we as a community have to do more to really rope everyone in, not to the United States, but into opportunities. Question.
Sure, no, it's just a comment, and it kind of piggybacks on a lot of things that everybody says. It's a lot about knowing what questions to ask and how to push. And it's whether care or insurance or education. And if you don't know the right questions to ask, you're not going to get the right things. So, for example, I have 2 sons with Duchenne. Elliot got his chair, we went, and I said, I want a standard feature. And they said, oh, you're going to wait years, forget it. And then I said, well, how much is it going to cost? Maybe we could just pay for it out of pocket. They gave us a wrong figure. They gave us a figure of $20,000, which from what I understand, that's completely off base. So now Ellie could say now he's mad because now we knew what to ask, and we waited a while, but we got the chair for his brother, which he's angry about because it's cooler, and it stands, and it's got a blinker, and it's got like Wi-Fi and like all this stuff. But in the beginning, it's like unbelievable. But it's all about like knowing, I didn't know, they just told me, don't push. You're never gonna get it, forget it. Like just stop. And the same thing with education. It varies from state to state, like or school to school. We're lucky, we have a great school district. They're very helpful with a lot of things. He's provided aids for extracurricular, but like other schools, like if you didn't know that you could push that, some school might say, you know what, too bad, your kid can't participate in extracurricular, because they don't have an aid. So it's all about like what questions to ask. And PPMD does I believe that we got the chair for Henry because everybody's fighting here, but it's all about knowing who to talk to. And when I have a question, I talk to Kathy, or I call you Pat, but or someone in the room. But it's again like if you don't, it's not fair that if you don't know the questions that you don't get the access to the best stuff.
I agree with you, but I totally agree with you. But in my view, you push for everything, right? I think my father used to complain that I never would allow anyone to tell me no. Don't ask my family at all. But if somebody says no, it's sort of a directive for me to get yes. Just inside me. Question.
Hello, hi, I'm Hilda, I'm from Iceland, and I just wanted to address, because you were talking about the biggest barriers and the clinical trials and the situation that we're in from other countries. I also wanted to talk about, because some medicines are approved by the EMA and FDA, and for me, I would really like to see a conversation internationally addressing that. Why is something allowed in the US and not in France or Germany or whatever? I mean, we're all just people. The medicine is going to work the same over here or over there. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, so I think it is true that in the regulatory environment, you have to go to the US, or not necessarily first to the US, or to the EMA, and then they have different processes, and then other countries may or may not accept that, and then they have to go. I think that's particularly troublesome for companies and for us waiting for therapies, right? I don't have any great ideas, but maybe Richard Klein could talk about the FDA and why they aren't just working with others so that there are, once an approval, once you get the data in one country, it just flows naturally. Why can't we get that to happen?
Well, it's a problem because different countries and different regulatory bodies, like the EMA, doesn't represent a country, but everybody's got different standards, and even in Europe, once EMA has an approval for something, each country still has an option whether or not to cover that and approve it for use in their country. But FDA works closely. There's, I think they're called cluster groups that we have that would meet every month or every 3 months, depending on the topic and what was necessary, for agencies to talk across borders about what kind of data they have, what they think of that data, what they think the problems are. But the underlying requirements for approval change from country to country. And in this country, there's a lot of legislative push for FDA to be more flexible. There's a lot of agreement inside the agency for FDA to be more flexible. But all of these agencies work within regulatory frameworks. So you've got to have the statute that sets the requirements and then interpret them into regulations and then put them into force. So it can take a while. And I think there's a growing flexibility at FDA, and I think there's a growing flexibility at EMA as well. But there are different laws and different requirements and different processes. So in Canada, even once the drug is approved, each of the provinces independently has to determine whether or not they're going to cover that and put it in a formulary for coverage. So it may be approved on a national scale, but not available in a particular province. So unfortunately, there's just a lot of variation.
It's just hard to sit and wait. Do you know?
I know.
Just hard to sit and wait. So we're going to go to the next question. There are barriers, services, access to care, access to immediate, access to emergencies. We need to work on those. A hotline, a Kathy Kinnett hotline 24/7. I know her husband will appreciate that. So that will be something we do on Monday. So the next question is, so all of the talks that you've had, which again, you've sat patiently for all these, what are you most excited or most hopeful about? Thoughts? Okay, Colin, you're on again. Thanks, Amanda.
So I would say, especially as we've seen these past couple of days, the gene therapy, that the results that we've seen with the, especially the videos of the boys, is really, I think that this treatment is really exciting and very hopeful.
Okay, who wants, I think all three companies are in the audience. Do you want to talk about how you're thinking about treating adults? Because we have some adults lined up right out front. Who wants to talk about how you're thinking about that? You want to be first? I know Solid's over there. Okay, you go first.
I'll go second.
Yeah, start.
Oh, just real quickly. So as I said, the next trial, we're going to have non-ambulatory patients. So I don't know the exact age ranges, but we'll have a very significant trial for non-ambulatory patients when we get to the commercial supply trial, which, as I think everyone knows, it is at least our goal and ambition to start at the end or before the end of this year. And then, of course, our goal is to have that in the label. And, of course, our goal is to have as rapid as possible access to all age ranges. And it kind of getting to that question about U.S. and ex-U.S., there are different regulatory standards, and one of the reasons we're being rigorous in the next study and in the current study with Dr. Mendel and doing things that are somewhat controversial, like using placebo-controlled trials, is that when we get to the end of this thing, we don't want to have a have and have-not perspective on gene therapy. And there are lots of ways to have and have-nots with these therapies. We can have and have-nots between ambulatory and non-ambulatory. We all know about that. We can have different have and have-nots based on what particular insurance you have, or what state you're in, or what country you're in. And we're putting a lot of effort right now into trying to find a pathway to ensure that we remove those barriers, to your last question, and that everyone has equal access to these therapies, ours or Pfizer's or Solid's, to the extent that we're successful in these studies.
Thank you. Well, first of all, we hope we don't have any have-nots in terms of access to therapy. And second of all, this placebo really scares us, especially in non-ambulatory or actually any age, really. So we should talk about that more. And if you could start tomorrow, we'd be happy with all of those. Is Mike Binks or any of the Pfizer people want to comment? And I know Solid's over here. Hello.
Yeah, likewise, we're planning for a non-ambulatory study to start after our pivotal ambulatory study. The population I worry a little bit about are the older ambulatory boys who may not get ready access early on through these programs. I hope that we can make the inclusion criteria broad enough to incorporate them. On the placebo issue, this is driven, as Doug says, by the need to ensure that we can get reimbursement for therapies once they're licensed by regulators. And there's also pressure from regulators to see randomized placebo-controlled trials. We're all working towards reducing those placebo groups as much as possible.
Yeah, I completely understand from the level of regulatory that they would like a comparator, right? A placebo-controlled trial. But from the point of a parent who is sitting there watching an infusion of gene therapy and thinking it could be a microdystrophin or it could be saline, I think you'd probably have to medicate me, to be fair, right?
And very fair. And I think the study designs are based on a delayed entry to treatment. That tends to be the way that everybody's thinking about it.
Okay, and because I can put you on the spot, I would like you to talk about what about females with a dystrophinopathy and what about Becker patients, and how are we going to think about those if you've got, because parents get a diagnosis of Becker based on an in-frame protein, right? But sometimes the in-frame protein's dumb. It doesn't work. It's not efficient. So then what? What happens next?
We can do one thing at a time. As you're aware, drug supply is a critical limiter for the rate of doing trials and getting to the marketplace. Once things are scaled up to a point where the drug is plentiful, then it's much easier to look at other populations and so on. But for our next wave of trials, I can't see that females or Becker patients are likely to be included in the initial tranche of regular pivotal trials.
But it's in your mind.
Certainly, we're thinking about that.
Annie, do you want to comment on Solid?
I'm happy to. Sure. Hi, everybody. Our current study includes ages.
Annie Gannot from Solid.
Hi, everybody. Annie Gannot is the ages of 4 to 17. So our current study includes non-ambulatory patients. The question was adults, and I think that, again, true to our mission as a company, as a mother of a child with Duchenne, sitting next to my two colleagues who have a 17-year-old son, and also my colleague Michael, a 26-year-old man with Duchenne, we care about every age and stage of this disease. I think that all the companies need to be thoughtful about different ways that we can include populations that historically have not been looked after. I think gene therapy is a very unique topic, a unique therapy. It's a one-time infusion. I think that we need to be thinking about potentially sibling studies. Right now, that's a big deal. I mean, you imagine you dose a sibling, there's another sibling at home, the risk of potentially that child or that brother becoming immunized is a concern. I think that also looking at other more creative ways of solving for the adult population needs to be thoughtful.
Yeah, so you've heard today about the fact that some people have more than one child, one individual in their family with Duchenne, and if one individual would receive gene therapy, what's the risk of that child, the other child that's waiting, to develop an immunity while they're waiting. So maybe Lee or Tim, do you want to comment on the risk that you see or not?
The risk for being immunized?
Yeah, so
Well,
if you have two boys with
sibling,
Duchenne
yeah.
and the 5-year-old or the 7-year-old was just treated, and that's good, so that would be terrific. And then you have some 3-year-old sitting there that you want treated. How is there a risk? Can you make guesses or some comments
I think
about
there's
the
a
risk?
risk, but we don't know really how to quantify it. I don't think any good studies have been done about the transmission. We don't really know even how it's transmitted. So there's a risk. It's fine. So it's not zero. It's not guaranteed either. So.
So do we put the 3-year-old in a bubble until?
Don't want to do that.
So are there things you could do to prevent it? So what happens?
Well, I mean, you could think about things like that. But
What are you thinking about?
Send him to the grandparents for a little while.
Oh, I have a granddaughter. You can send her to me.
Maybe that's not an option for everyone.
I mean, I think it's a huge, huge issue that must be addressed, and we need to study it. And I think that it's an obligation of the investigators who are working in this field to do this in tandem with the trials that are ongoing. So when we are prepared, when we do have supply that's adequate, that we'll be ready to go with that information when we need to be there. It's kind of like newborn screening. Newborn screening is not here everywhere at the moment, but we're getting ready for when we do have a treatment that we can implement newborn screening. So I think it's sort of anticipatory science, so to speak, to understand how that answer is going to impact the community.
But for the families lined up for gene therapy who have other children, it's a conversation we have to hold pretty quickly. And we will launch newborn screening in New York State soon. I don't know when, but soon, like within months. And so we are beginning that process to see if we can get it on the RUSP, which is the recommended uniform screening panel, and then it goes state by state. So that is on our radar, and that means all of you have to then treat babies. So get that plan together as well. All right, question.
Hi. I just wanted to comment that maybe the drug companies can look at using women or siblings as a secondary objective. That way they can be tested in tandem. You know it's exploratory from the beginning, and then you get your data to compare to later to ensure if there's any validity to it, and you get all your experimental done at the same time. But bringing it in as a secondary objective, I think, would be allowed.
Thoughts? You want to repeat the question?
Not so much a question, but a comment. So, there's a lot of concern about bringing in women or other dystrophinopathies, siblings, things like that. Bring them into your trial and make it clear that they're part of a secondary objective. This way you can allow them into your trial. You can add them in there, but they're not going to mess up your primary objective. You can still keep them in. Then you can use them as comparative data to what your primary objective is, and at least in my eyes, it's almost like a win-win, because then you can get that data to see if it is comparable. Then if you're getting some positive results, you can open it up to the broader range and know that you're going to get good data.
So you're thinking of the sibling with the diagnosis as a control group?
Females, anything. It depends on the design of the trial. You want to make sure that, of course, you're meeting all your other criteria, depending on each company and what they're going for. But open it up to the other populations too, so wherever you can.
So just so I understand, you're thinking of opening it up to other muscular dystrophies with females that have other muscle disease?
Well,
or
right
how,
now
how
I'm
would
just
it work?
saying females and siblings because we kind of know that they're in the same area. Becker, I mean, wherever you can, open that up, but bring them in as a secondary objective, because you'll be able to fulfill your primary, you'll be able to expand it, and at least have something to compare them to even see if it's worth having a larger trial with that population.
Okay.
Just a suggestion.
Okay, so in all trials, you're thinking about getting this big population together?
Again, it depends on the design. So I'm coming from the testing background myself, so that's why I'm saying I can see it coming into play, but it won't be applicable for all trials, but it is something to definitely consider as you're building your trial.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could, if there's several individuals in a family with the disease, you could enter them in terms of measuring outcomes, but you might have two different ages, which wouldn't be an exact control. It would be hard, I think. Anyone want to comment on that?
I think you make a generally good point. There is a way, to your very good point, when you're thinking about perhaps other populations that might themselves be inappropriate for the main trial, you can do a separate arm. There's no doubt about that. As we think about the way we prioritize that, let's linger for a moment on the sibling issue, because that's a compelling one. That one isn't a mere, something that would be nice to have. We have a compelling issue that stands in front of us. And gene therapy in particular creates its own issues, viral shedding and the like. Even if it is somewhat theoretical, it's still significant. And putting even that to one side, the very idea, if you have a transformative therapy, of it being offered to one child and then it either delayed or for a really long time these kids can't get it, seems to be inappropriate. So we're looking very carefully at that concept of having a sibling protocol. The sibling would very well, it could very well not be in the main trial. It's just that we have to find a way when we have sufficient supply to make sure that if a sibling's in a trial, there's not an think about how horrible that is, sort of an intra-family have and have not situation. We're going to find that solved. And then as it relates to other cohorts, we need to look at that down the road. Becker's is a really significant opportunity for all of us that we've got to look at, and we're thinking about that right now. And then we've talked yesterday, that question came up, and I actually had another conversation with the parent who asked about girls, and we'll go back and think about that. I don't think that is going to be an access issue. I think we'll be able to get girls. We have Exondys on the market today. We didn't test it in females, but we do get females on that therapy when there are manifesting carriers. But we'll go back and look again at whether there's valuable data that we can get and maybe think about down the road an arm. But Dr. Binks is right as well. We have to be very thoughtful about the fact that we've got to make sure that we can fully pursue the main trials so that we can get the most good for the most folks as fast as possible. So we've got to think about all of these things, and we are.
I'm gonna
Linda?
I'm going to represent a little bit of a discussion that we've had in our rows since then. These trials are ongoing right now, and boys are being injected with virus, and it's an opportunity at this moment to collect data from siblings in the household and other family members to see what is the viral load in these individuals. So I would contend that we are currently at this very second in time missing an opportunity to collect the data that we need to carry these additional studies on once additional material is available, so we can do expanded studies.
I was just going to say that. You'd get so much more data and be able to compare the siblings. It'd be a great learning curve.
I personally think we should have this sort of like the Children's Oncology Network, where everyone goes into a trial and you test these different drugs. So I totally agree with that. I think the gene therapy trials are a little bit of a different model and it's really early days with gene therapy. We have our fingers crossed. I think people are lining up. I would guess that people are lining up. But I think these are early days when we try to figure out how to do that better and more. The whole goal is to do it more quickly, right? Get that supply up and let's just treat everyone. So now what are you telling me to do? Okay, so now I have to ask it again, getting orders from Kimberly. So what are you most excited and hopeful about? You've heard lots of things. Okay.
As the grandmother of a 14-year-old, to come and see these young men gives me hope to take back to him, and to be able to show him and go back and stream this meeting is going to give him a little more backbone. I mean, he's got goals, but he needs people around him that'll support those goals, and to know that there are people and that there's guys out here that are doing their thing, then he can have hope to do his too.
I think one of the hardest things is to come to this meeting and be surrounded with people who don't ask you 1,000 questions that to you having a diagnosis makes no sense, right? Like, so why are you in a chair? Why does your son have large calf muscles? And for maybe some of your primary care docs to say you're the expert, or you'll know more about this than I do, and your communities that don't know this, and sometimes you say, my son has Duchenne, and then somebody will say, yes, my aunt has MS, and you're like, okay, but I'm not sure that's apples to apples, right? And in my own community, it was hard because nobody knew about this, right? And people would say to me, like, your sons look really healthy, and I was like, Right. They had beautiful faces and they did look healthy, but the muscles weren't. So I think to come to this meeting and have everyone know and really feel the support of everyone around you and then go back to your community with the, hey, my aunt has MS, we're like right on the same path, it's really hard. So hopefully you can deliver that hope to your son and hopefully or your grandson, and hopefully he'll watch some of the streaming to see that in fact things are changing. And maybe next year we're in Phoenix, Arizona. No, we're in Scottsdale, Arizona. So if he's willing, he can always spend time at the bar with other people that I know here who've been at the bar. So, and in all of the sessions where they're learning and talking openly about what their hopes and dreams are and what some of their barriers are. So keep that in mind. Question?
Pat, can I just do a quick plug for anybody who wasn't with us? The PAC members have created a closed Facebook room, or I don't know if that's what you call it, group, thanks Stephanie, group for teens and adults with Duchenne and Becker, and we will send a link to all registrants and it'll be in the newsletter. So you can share it with your family members back home who are ages 14 and older. It's really appropriate for high schoolers and older who have Duchenne and Becker so they can connect with one another because we want what happened here to remain consistent throughout the year. So I just wanted to plug that.
And isn't the PAC planning webinars and stuff?
And the webinars, we're doing webinars, we push them out, but they also get posted in there. And ask any of the guys around here, in the aisles here, about what we do with the PAC, and we will be promoting it through the Facebook page and online.
All right, other questions? Question, over here.
Okay, so my husband and I are just ecstatic that we have a new family. We have people to talk to now. We don't feel alone. That's been something we've been struggling with the last 3 months, so thank you.
I'm glad. Back here is a question.
Yeah, over and above the tremendous amount of work that's going into research and the therapies that are potentially going through, what I'm most excited about for this conference is how accessible all the doctors, the pharmaceutical companies, right from the CEOs down to the CMOs and the reps have been. But I would like to see that continued in the outside world. Pharmaceutical companies and doctors feel very inaccessible when we're out and about, even when they're recruiting for their trials and they put on the clinicaltrial.gov website, all inquiries to this email address. Do you know what? It would be really nice if you just responded to acknowledge that you got our email. Clearly, I'm not the only one. You know, we're humans, we've got little boys. We want to know that you can hear us and not just meeting us once a year and nodding and smiling and telling us that you care is good enough. Be accessible to us when we need you to be. Be accessible to us when we contact you. I know your time is precious. I know you're incredibly in demand and you have so much on your plate trying to fix this problem. But if we contact you, please respond to us. Do you know how much of a difference it makes to our day to get a response? Just to say, hey, thanks for your email and your interest. We're not quite there yet. Here's a customer, a patient advocacy person, and we'll check back with you in perhaps a couple of weeks. Give us a response, give us a rough timescale, and let us know that we're in your minds. That's what I'm most excited about. And to all the pharmaceutical companies and the doctors and scientists that have spent time with me this last few days, thank you. Thank you for sounding like you care about me and my son, even though I'm not even from the US. I'm British, if anybody got that.
No.
I thought.
So to be fair, I mean, and to tell you a really selfish story, no one really knew, right, in my small hometown. So one of the reasons to start an organization such as this is to really get connected, right? To be able to talk to a doctor, talk to a pharmaceutical person, talk to the government, talk to someone who is going to at least tell you that they understand or learn from you and then figure out what to do next. So I'm really grateful to all the docs and all the pharmaceutical companies that have come. I don't know if they can answer every email. I mean, like you, I would expect, and then I would expect it like within 5 minutes of my mail. So, but I think it's really hard, because I'm guessing, and maybe you could comment, and maybe you all could comment, any of the pharma people in the audience, how many emails a day that you would get from them. And then I also worry if, when we get responses back, then we share the responses on Facebook, and then all of a sudden we've got a trial going on Facebook that says if you go to Middletown, Ohio, you get gene therapy, right? So I think it's really hard to keep consistent, frequent emails from all of the people that you hear. I think that's why we do these kinds of forums. That's why they're gracious enough to come and spend their weekends to sit down in times like this and take advantage of the opportunity. It's a selling point for the conference, to be honest. It's why when we gather, we can have individuals from companies and from the clinics be there. I think about some of the clinicians and how much responsibility they have to see all these patients so frequently, do all the charting, then do all the stuff, and then 100 emails from different patients. Also, then there's a clinical liability if they say, take aspirin, and they live in a different state. They might be worried, and their institution might have some liability issues. And I think companies are bound, especially public companies, by other SEC people and people who make rules that we probably don't like. So I don't know if anyone wants to comment on that. It's just hard, and I don't disagree with you that the world feels better when you can sit down with a doc or sit down from somebody from pharma and they listen to what you want to get done and have a response. So anyone want to take that on? Good. Somebody, Doug?
Look, I mean, this is an honor for me. Let's start here, and I'm sure there are a number of Sarepta folks in this room. I can tell you, and I've said this before, and this is not fluff. This is an honor. I mean, the opportunity to get in front of the very people that we think, at least, that we're creating therapies that may help is unbelievably important to us. I would like to believe that we don't hide when we're not here. So I come to this meeting, I go to Rome, I've been to Birmingham. We try to get out a lot, but we try to, we're not, if you look on our website and you see sort of contact patient advocacy, just so you know, that's not a number or an email. That's Siobhan right here. There she is. She's right there. And that's Allison over there. And that's Diane Barry, to whom they report. And they will respond to you. And I hope there are people in this room. I know people have come up to me and said, hey, I sent you an email. Now, this is really dangerous because I'm going to say this. People say, I've sent you an email. I'm like, oh, dear God, did I respond? And so far, everyone said yes. I'm sure there are many times when it's gone past me and I haven't. But we will interact with you. So contact us. We've had folks, I know there are families that have literally just been in Cambridge and popped into Sarepta, and I know that and it was literally just on a spur of the moment. We brought them up and we got to meet them. I met them, some other people met them, we gave them a tour. So, we're a small group of people. We could easily let things fly by us. I apologize in advance if that happens, but I will be surprised if you don't get responses back from us when you contact us, when you contact Siobhan or Allison or Diane or myself. But if you contact me, you should copy them because they won't let me get away with not responding. So
Other comments? Can we call your cell, Mike? Mike, Dr. Binks, can you pass out that cell phone today?
Yeah, he's pushing me out here. So,
okay. So much for the cell phone number, right?
Right, yeah. Well, so this is something that I struggle with because on a personal level, I've met so many wonderful families, and that's what motivates us, and that's what inspires us. But as we work so intimately on the trials, there's also this pressure. And before I came to Rare, there was this separation that wasn't meant to be impersonal at all, but it was more because there's just, in terms of the data integrity and what we go to the regulators with, they really want to make sure that there was no influences, there weren't biases that were introduced, or we weren't swaying, and we weren't, and so there's that, just to keep it objective. That's the whole point. The data are supposed to be kept objective. So it really, I have this struggle personally all the time where I'm like, want to connect with these families, I want to have the conversations, but I have also this paranoia that if I do anything that might be looked at or just misinterpreted in terms of creating some type of bias that I could compromise the data, and then everything, all the sacrifices that families have made who have participated could be at risk. And so we also, even within our organization, try to create just some firewalls so that we're not even influencing people to join our trial that might not be appropriate. We feel fortunate that we get invited to these meetings, we get to meet these families, but what we've done is we've set up a patient advocate with whom that conversation can happen, but sometimes I fear that I get an email and maybe I try to send it to her, and it doesn't mean that I don't want to talk to you, because I really do, but I'm just, it's this tricky balance of trying to keep things objective and getting that data. If that makes sense, I don't know.
Yes, it makes sense. And more comments?
I'm happy to respond. I personally reply to every phone call, every email, every meeting request. I feel like I'm very fortunate that I'm a member of this community, so it's a very natural relationship for me to have. And every opportunity that we have to engage with the patient community, we do it. Whether it's patient conferences, it's events that we have at our office through World Duchenne Awareness Day, Rare Disease Day, every opportunity that we have to engage with the community, we do it because it makes us better. So thank you.
Other companies in the audience, I see these three up front. Is Paolo here or any of the other companies? There we are.
Yeah, Jacqueline Delfgård from Mallinckrodt. I talked yesterday evening. Most of you, I guess, were not here because it was really late. But I also put up my name as the last thing on the slides. And I also will keep my promise. I received the first email, and I was just saying, I have not responded yet, but we already nodded that I've seen the email, and that I will definitely do that. I'm at the moment still focused here, but I can also promise that I take it very seriously. I do very much understand the colleague from Pfizer. I've done that in the past also with rare disease. It's really different than if you develop other medications where we need to be so careful with like standing away. So what I usually do is I will take the first email and also reply, but then loop you into other channels where it's easier for me, who will at the end look at the data later, stands kind of like outside. Yeah, but I will definitely make the connections. I will reply to the emails.
Thank you. Other comments?
Can I just clarify what I was actually saying? I actually meant when there was a call to action from patient groups to email the pharmaceutical companies. So no, I don't expect the CEO, the gentleman from Sarepta, to respond to my email. That would be wonderful, but unexpected. More so on the trial basis, where when there's a clinical trial, they've opened it up on clinicaltrials.gov, or there's an announcement, and they say to patients, if you're interested in registration in our trial, email us, and we'll get right back to you. You email them, and nobody gets back to you, and you don't know if they've got it. And I'm not talking about the conflict of interests and all those complicated things. I absolutely appreciate that, understands. But if there's a call to action to email a customer, I call it customer advocacy. Sorry, I'm in IT. patient advocacy. Then if you're asking us to contact you, you should be responding to us. So that was more my point, as opposed to individuals that would create a conflict.
But now we have cell phones, so you can call them at any time as well. But I think also sometimes it goes to clinical sites, and I've heard, at least I've heard and seen posts on Facebook that people call a particular clinical site and that clinical site doesn't get back to them because they're overwhelmed or what. So it could be a message to some of the PIs as you do those steering committee meetings that, they really need to respond to those emails, even if it's, I'll call you next week, but then they really have to call you next week. But it is true that when you email something because there's an update or a possibility, you do expect something back that gives you some direction at least. Okay, we're going to go to the last question. So this is for us, for all of us. What can we do better as a community? What aren't we doing? What are the things that we missed, that we forgot about, that don't feel like you to be a high priority? Question. Okay, Elizabeth.
So my comment is just to not forget that while we're fighting to end Duchenne, those of us who have it, our lives have meaning and value, even when we're not fighting, when we're just being people to support us, to be there for us, while we live with this, even before we get to the end.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate the comment, because I think that living your life, and for all of us, right? This is difficult for all of us, for all of you, for you, for all of the families. It's really hard. And sometimes you feel like 24/7 you should be in Washington or doing something, or you're not doing enough, right? And I think for all of us as families, saying life and the quality of life is enough, right? To spend time with your family, to say, I'm going to take a day off, or I'm going to take a month off for that matter, of all of this, to take a break from Facebook, which I have to sometimes. But I think all of us have to realize that there is a point at which it's enough. And you have to just be recognized that it's fair to live your quality, right? The quality of life that you can achieve. And I think that's exactly right, and we need to pay attention to that and listen. First of all, I wanted to say thank you. You traveled a long distance. You've been with this community for a long time. I remember meeting you in Washington about 13, 15 years ago. Seems like yesterday. And then I felt like women with dystrophinopathy were just not heard, and I didn't know there was an opportunity. So I think you've heard that there are going to be opportunities, and you've been amazing. And I certainly, if we're not doing it right and not listening enough, please say that out loud 1 million times to us until it sinks in and we do something about it. So thank you. Other thoughts? Down here.
I know there's a large number of individuals in the community that have interest in learning about stem cell therapies. Can you explain your perspective and view on that type of treatment?
You're asking me? Where did Lee go? Where's Lee when you need him, right? So stem cells are really, really hard. And at Lee's meeting, which was New Directions about 2 or 3 years ago, we had a separate session on cell therapies. And we brought in Kosu from Italy. I think he now lives in the UK. And we brought in the woman from Minnesota that I can't remember her name right now. I think it begins with a P. We brought in all,
Dr. Perlingaro?
Good. Thank you, Liz. You are wonderful. So we brought in all these stem cell people to talk about it, because to be honest, when our sons were diagnosed, I was chasing all over everywhere. And I'm not going to look at my family because I know I'm going to get like the evil eye, like, yes, you were. And there was a doctor where there was actually a lot of publications around myoblast transfer. Myoblasts are immature muscle cells. And the thinking was, and it made perfect sense, if you have an immature muscle cell that's healthy and you stick them into a muscle that is unhealthy, then they'd all have a good marriage and life would be perfect, right? So this is where Donna Sacamano and I met. This is where Jesse's Journey and I met, which, the whole folks from Jesse's Journey. So I've known John and Shereen Davidson for a lot of years. So we went down to Memphis, Tennessee, and we said, this is it. This is really it. And so there were several docs. One was in California, one was in Memphis, and one was in Boston, and they were doing myoblast transfer, right? And then I'm going to get you in a minute, so you have to comment on this, Stan. So what happened was they began this process, and they were doing these myoblasts. They would get and culture myoblasts from healthy individuals. So my son Chris's good friend, Matt, gave his biopsy, and then they were cultured in this dish, and they grew to be zillions of cells. It was fabulous, and they were going to stick them in, and they did, and they didn't do anything. And every day I looked at their muscles and said, just contract your muscle, and then I saw a contraction, and I thought, look, they're doing something. But the reality was they didn't do anything. So we had this meeting, and this was just years ago, just a few years back. And the problem with stem cells are several. One is, what type of stem cell are you going to give? And there were all sorts of discussions about there's different kinds of stem cells that do different things and act differently when you get them in the body. And so you might have to, Kosu said, you might have to get a couple different stem cells and culture them out and stick them in there. So that's one problem. What are you delivering? The second problem is delivery. Where are you going to deliver them? Because if you're delivering them by vein, your liver is a magnificent organ that sometimes we wish didn't work exactly the way it does, and it just trashes them. So that's another, how are you going to, look at all the muscle we have, right? You have to deliver them to every muscle in the body. And then you have to get those cells to integrate with the muscle cell that's defective. And in general, the body says that's not self and just crashes it out of there. So even in Memphis, Tennessee, where we're using cyclosporin A and some of these immune suppressive agents that you've heard about, And those had side effects. So I think the problems still remain. How are you going to get them in there? What cell are you going to use? And how are you going to get them engrafted? So we've not conquered those things, not at all. And there certainly is a lot of enthusiasm. We've gotten some grants from the woman with the name of a P, and we've sponsored her. In full disclosure, the Department of Defense, thanks to your advocacy, has money, and there's a couple of us that sit on those committees, and we've been funding some of these things, but they still have the same troubles. Can you comment on this for me and save me, kind of? Yeah.
Sure. I'll stand up for a sec. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's very much as you said. I mean, so stem cells exist. Actually, muscles have incredibly powerful stem cells. They're called satellite cells. They can differentiate into myoblasts, and they can absolutely repopulate your muscles. And everybody in this room has some satellite cell activation going on today, and you're repopulating your muscles today. So that sounds really promising, that you ought to be able to tap into these stem cells and make it work. We're also in an era where we've been for decades using stem cells clinically. So bone marrow transplantation is the place that we've been doing it for now decades. And we can now, this is all royal take stem cells out of people's body by just their peripheral blood, genetically manipulate them outside their body, and put back their own stem cells and repopulate their bone marrow. So this has actually been done for a couple of diseases. And these will be new therapies, gene therapy and stem cell therapy, but ex vivo and outside the body in these instances. So this gives us the allure, the appearance that stem cell therapy is here, but trying to get stem cells back into muscle and trying to repopulate the most numerous cell in your body, get it to fuse with your cells. If it got there, it probably would, but we don't know what that stem cell state is. We don't know how to get enough of those into the body so that they can get through the vasculature and get into muscle and then meaningfully repopulate. It's provocative because it does occur. We've actually seen some stem cell fusions in muscles, but at really, really low rates, so that there's never any therapeutic benefit. But it also opens up that possibility that if it happens at all, can't we eventually biologically figure out how to make it happen a lot? And I think that's sort of where the field is for sort of stem cell transplantation. April Pyle's lab at UCLA has been working on mouse and sort of mouse muscle cell differentiation and transplantation, has looked at various factors that help promote the idea that muscle stem cells can get back into muscle and can repopulate the muscle. And even there, it's kind of some of the most successful direct transfer in a mammalian, and it's really ineffective in terms of it's as good as it gets, and it's nowhere close to what you'd possibly want for our boys. So I just think we're far away.
It's making progress. So Catherine Wagner, do you want to comment?
So I agree with everything that's been said. I think stem cells have a lot of potential for the future. It's much further down the road than gene therapy or other genetic modifications. And we need to be really careful at this time while we're supporting the science, good science being done on it. We need to be really careful of those who might take advantage of you. And offer something called stem cells, which is really not yet ready for prime time.
Other questions? Other questions? Question over here.
I was just going to mention that I think obviously we need a lot of support and money from everyone for the for therapy and a lot of things, and I think that there's like no people that we shouldn't talk to. I think we need to inform more different groups of people that have no relation at all to Duchenne and try to get them to try to help and do more. And I think we can't really take no as an answer, and if they try to tell you that things that are obviously less important, trying to compare things like arthritis to a Duchenne and trying to, try to think that things aren't that important. I think that Duchenne isn't as important as, we really shouldn't let different groups do that, and we should try to keep them more informed and try to, have different people and I think we need more people to stick up for us and try to defend us and tell the people that, Duchenne is really important and it really makes a difference, anything that you can do to help, and just like being more understanding in the public and people that we see every day, that they need to be a little bit more understanding and a little bit more sensitive and a little bit more caring about and how they think about stuff. So I just think we need more people that stand up, and I think the people that do that are really special and really great, and it means a lot. So.
Thank you, Michael. So I think a couple things. First of all, you're hired in development, and you can just pass the basket and we'll just take all the jewelry. That's what we'll do tonight. But you're right about people with Duchenne. For us in this audience, it's number one. It's number one, right? It's what we want done. It's what we want to see therapies for, and access and reimbursement. And for the disability community, we want respect for that disability community, want their voice heard. And we want them to be valued in this society as we're all human beings. And whether you're in a chair, or whether you're old, not me, but others, or young, we all have value and we all need to be recognized and appreciated. And I think we have to be tender with each other, because I think in the busyness of life, we sometimes aren't very tender with each other either. So I think that was wonderful, and you have a job. We'll compare notes and we'll see what you're being paid, and we'll outdo them. But anyway, thank you for that. Other comments?
So my comment ties the last two questions together about what you're optimistic about and what you're hopeful about, or what do you appreciate. And the one thing that I appreciate the most is all the companies, the sponsors that are coming to this community. But the thing that I'm most hopeful about, and the thing I think that that can be done to better the community, is somebody right here next to us that's probably wearing a red shirt. We talk about Duchenne as being a multi-system disorder. It's not just in the body. It's within our lives as a community. And while we're anticipating better treatments, better therapies, we've got to live our lives. We get questions about what a developmental disability is. What's the definition at the federal level? What's the definition at the state level? Well, there's probably someone that's sitting next to you who has an older child who has been through it. I think if we network together, we can solve a lot of those issues. The discussion about Social Security, what's substantial gainful activity, what does that mean to myself as an individual with Duchenne in terms of employment? These are things that someone in this room has heard before, has experienced with, and we as a community can do that together to help ourselves. Because while we're anticipating the better treatments, the better outcomes for our loved ones and ourselves with Duchenne, we still got to live our lives. And oftentimes that means a battle with a school, or a battle with the approvals process for a benefits program. But there might be someone in the community, it may not be within our state, but who has some experience that can help to support us. We've been through a lot as a family, and we got that assistance when we started out. We made the effort. This was in the era before internet. We had to travel 4 hours to somebody else's home to learn about care practices and about how to prepare for our sons when they got older and needed this assistance. But again, I think that there's someone here that may understand and may know, and I think that there is so much benefit to working together, and I would like to advocate that. Look for someone with either a red shirt, maybe they don't have one on, maybe it's just that you're a neighbor, but that's the network that builds our homes and builds our community, and we need to rely on one another.
Thank you. Yeah, we have an incredible network, and we should rely on each other. Buddy, I think you have a question, is that right? Oh, wait a minute, where is your wig and hat?
She's coming later, don't worry about it.
Okay.
Oh, so just to chain off of the last comment, I think the best thing we can do is remember that we, the community, are our greatest resource. That use everyone else in this room. And since the PAC began, I've seen enormous changes in this community, that we've grown closer together and to rely on each other better. And please use the PAC Facebook group. Please contact us on an individual level. If you want my cell phone, you can have my cell phone number. If your child is going away to college, you can talk to me. You can talk to my parents. We'll figure things out. But the community is its best resource.
I agree. Thank you, thank you. Another question?
Hello. I've been very blessed to be part of this community. I've been attending this organization for more than 10 plus years. Sohail is, my son is here. He's 20 now. And it's funny that we are actually from India. We migrated about 17 years back, but when Sohail was diagnosed in India, they didn't know what was Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It was funny, they told us different things. One of them said, you know what, it's good luck to you. He was one of the famous hospitals told us that it's good luck, nothing you can do about it, just live the life you have. Coming back here, it's totally different. I've seen in the last 10 years, amazing progress, amazing building up in the community, especially being an immigrant, it's a little different because you're coming here, you're fighting the odds, you're learning everything. But at the same time, I would say that what we went through and what just Barry said about it, the same thing. My son is 20 now, so we've learned a lot of what he went through, what he did, especially my wife spending time with schools and colleges. And in this new community, as a lot of new members are here, if you have any questions, if you need anything, any resource, we can be of any help to you. Even my son, he's attending third year, he's attending in UCLA, so he's been through college too now. So we could be of any help to you in any way regarding medication, any different things, what we've experienced, including stem cells. I've been to India twice for doing stem cells. It was a hoax. It was just taking money and fooling you. So we went through a lot of it. If we can be of any help to you, please reach out to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, we'll come to Colin, then we'll come right back to you.
Buddy kind of got to what I was going to say, but I just really appreciative of Parent Project, listening to the voices of the young adults in the community. I really enjoy making a difference in the community, and I really, I'm so glad we had such a big attendance of teens and young adults. I'm also would be happy to give my phone number to any of you, as Buddy said.
When we started, parents didn't bring their children, and we didn't have young adults come to the conference. So I'm really delighted for the PAC and the amount of young men here. And I may not be delighted for your advice, especially political, but that's a different matter. But we are delighted with what you bring to us, which is everything. Thank you all for taking time, because I know travel with chairs and all of the things that you need is not easy, but I appreciate all that your parents do and all that you do to be willing to do that. And like the question to the pharma and everybody else, how fast do they respond? If you get an email, 30 seconds and it's a response. Okay.
Not that I'm trying to create a new position with PPMD, but kind of backing on what Brian said, and also Buddy. The DMD Moms page has been an absolute blessing to me and a huge resource. However, I feel sometimes that even well-intended individuals who are far more intelligent than I am, maybe possibly giving a little bit of advice that may be on their scope of expertise. Though again, it is well-intended, I wish that there would possibly be some sort of a forum that would have somebody far more intelligent than myself able to kind of filter those things, or possibly answer questions, or just make sure that things that are being put out there are actually accurate and helpful and not harmful, even though it may be unintended to be harmful, but yeah.
I think social media is just hard in general because there's so many different groups, and depending on what group you're in, sometimes there's a person with a louder voice than others or more or less experience than others, but at least it's been my experience. So on the PPMD, it's usually try to put things in context. That's what we do, and try to answer the question as best as we can with the information we have. So we come to the PPMD. To be honest, on other groups, when I see conversations going on, then I always wait for Carrier Stan to comment, and I think, okay then, But I also find that this is a really intelligent community, and even if someone puts up something that's not particularly in context, or is scientifically or medically accurate, I find, first of all, I call Kathy if it's medical, but the other thing is I find that we course correct. So somebody can say, we're all gonna, take aspirin tonight and 10 of them every hour and that's gonna fix everything. And then you hear, I'm following, and then you hear somebody say, no, you're gonna bleed to death if you take all that aspirin, right? So I do see a course correction, but I think it is hard because every other minute a new group pops up, right? And it would be, and we have Stephanie in our organization that keeps us alert, and Will that keeps monitoring it and comes to all of us and says this. So sometimes when we see it, then we go to one of, the Annie and the Ryan and the Kathy and the Eric Caminos and say, can you write a blog that puts this in context? And so you'll see us kind of come back and try to create a blog around if we're seeing misinformation. So, well, oh my gosh, Stacy. I'm just kidding. No, there's no question and answer, but what I'm saying is we're monitoring it. So if we have times when we post and if we see something that goes off the rail, we usually try to create a blog with the expert inside who can do that, and then we post it. So if you see something, or if anyone sees something that you think doesn't sound right, if you send any of us a mail and say this seems a little odd to us, then we'll try to address it. But again, we're all trying our very best, and depends on, we all want hope. And so sometimes you read a little blurb that happened in somewhere else and you think, let's all take this drug. And people have come to us and said, why don't you do a trial? Now, I think we could. But trials are, as you've heard from these companies, trials are really hard things to put up. They have to be rigorous. The data has to be rigorous, or the FDA is going to just toss it out. And to change medical opinion, if we all went to Linda Kripe and said, listen, I think we all should be on this heart medicine, so why don't you write that down and make every doctor do it? I'd venture to say that's a hard thing, right? She'd want evidence. So if you see something, let us try to help, and then we'll tell you if we can or can't. So. Okay, that's an idea. I hope it's warm and has mountains as well, and we'll see if we can buy a country and just all go there. We'll need a little support, so you might, everyone chip in on that one. So Michael will fundraise and we'll get it done. But I think Kimberly is ready for, do we have another question? Sorry. Oh, sorry. Last two questions.
Okay, I wanted to, this is a combination of that question with the question before. Because basically, yes, there is a lot of hope, but apparently the time it takes from hope to become reality, it seems too long for us, especially considering that this is a progressive disease. So I was thinking if there is a way in which we can speed up that process to turn that hope into a reality. I know that, for example, the FDA approval requires certain steps and phases, and they stay a long time and so on. But maybe moving from, for example, the people from CRISPR, they were saying, okay, we are here, and they were showing that graph in which we are in the middle of the minefield, more or less. What can make people from that, for example, that field, CRISPR or gene therapy redosing, move faster? What's a bottleneck? What is slowing us down? Is lack of funding? So should we work harder on funding? For example, I'll give you an example. As far as I know, the early stage of investment basically depend a lot of governments or parent foundations like this. Basically, big pharma or venture capitalists are not interested at the beginning of the game. I don't know if I'm wrong. That's my understanding. Can we probably inject more money into it? Can we do better with fundraising? I was surprised that talking with many parents here, nobody knows about the Race to End Duchenne program. Honestly, I've been in this not too long ago. My son was diagnosed last December. And I know last year, at the beginning of this year, we did a bike tour in New York. And even though I'm not from the US, I don't know much people here. I mean, I live in the US, but I wasn't born here, so my social circle is very limited. But I managed to gather a decent amount, which I feel proud of it. And I think that we have a lot of people here with red shirts. With all of us do our little effort. I'm pretty sure some of them do. Actually, the person who gives me inspiration to do this is Brian Coran, who is very successful at fundraising. But I know maybe it's a matter of money or investing more money in those preclinical studies. I know I'm thinking that Is this a race against time? Every day that passes by, I'm worried that my son will lose more and more function. So I want these promising therapies, this promising pipeline to move faster, as fast as possible. So my question is, what can we do to increase the speed of development?
Yeah, so there are a couple questions there. The first one is money, right? Do we need money? And thank you for the bike tour, and thank you all who raise money. Everybody can do something, and I think that's really important because we're always investing in more research, right? Because you want second generation, you want better microdystrophins, you want to keep pushing the field. So research and the investment in research is always going to be really important. But I think the second question is about process, and I think the process of getting from a safety study through to an approval. And then with our first approval, which is Exondys 51, I think as a community, we all thought, well, that'll get approved and then we'll have it tomorrow, right? Which, as we talked about, the barriers to that, right? The barriers to fighting insurance companies or the barriers in other countries. So this is a long process. Abby Bronson has been working for the last, I think she feels like 100 years, but she's been with us about 5-6 years, almost 3 years, never mind. So when she came in, she wanted to do something transformative. So how hard would it be to put up a master protocol or a platform study, which means that many of the drugs would go into this? So I kind of imagine it like this. When you build a clinical trial, it's like building a house, right? You have to build this house, you need the infrastructure, you need all the stuff, you need the furniture, the landscaping, the whatever, right? So a company does that, and then when the trial's over, that gets collapsed. So one of the thoughts on a platform study is, can you build an apartment building? So you have lots of people in trials, and could you get to yes or no on this, it's working on this child, yes or no, and get them out, or this adult, and get everyone in trial. And it's very easy to say, and I think Abby would say to you, it's really hard to do. So we are trying to figure out how to accelerate the clinical trial process, but it's hard. It's hard, and companies might be reluctant to join such a process, although we're still pushing for it. So, and the regulatory process is slow, so I agree with you. I mean, I hope that we get really early data, so this is now making it up, right? But I hope we get early data from these trials that is so powerful that we can go to the FDA and say, look at this dramatic change, approve it, right? I'm really hopeful. We're in early days with gene therapy. Some of these trials are in safety trials. Some of them are in phase 2, so it's early. But I'm hopeful that together, the companies, the families, the patients who are in those trials can all look and see dramatic benefit in an outcome measure that's measurable, so you can go see FDA or EMA or the South American regulatory folks or Japanese and say, look, this is so dramatically different, because there have been approvals with dramatic improvement, and I think any of you can speak to those. There have been approvals based on a small amount of data that's extraordinarily powerful. That's where I want to go, because I agree with you. It's a race against time. So thank you, first of all, for your fundraising, but second of all, if anybody else has thoughts on how to accelerate this process, I'd love to hear them, or if we're missing something that we could do to accelerate the process, let us know. Thoughts? One thought? Last thought. Question. Oh, question. Okay. One last question.
So my question is more about just clarity for the community itself, and it kind of ties a little bit with what you're saying through the approval process. Really excited about gene therapy and what we're seeing, and all these other drugs that are coming down the line. My question really is around how do you make it more clear for us? Because if it's clear to us, it's going to be clear to the FDA, and that's ultimately what it needs to go through to help our boys. So listening to the gene therapy talks yesterday specifically, I noticed a couple differentiators that were being thrown out. And to me, that is a little confusing via, let's say, how you measure dystrophin, for instance. Different companies are doing it different ways. Or if an AAV virus, the virus is going to cross the blood-brain barrier, what does that mean to me? I mean, is that important as a parent? Or is that just a differentiator in sales? Because we're getting to a point where this is becoming a reality and very exciting, and I appreciate all the hard work researchers and doctors have put into this and what companies have invested in this. So I just want to make sure that because time is of the essence, it gets to the FDA, it's clear to them, it's clear to us, and it goes to approval so that boys out there get this treatment.
Yeah, so we talked a lot about this today. And first of all, I am no one to tell you about how to measure or quantify dystrophin. I know what the testing methodologies are. I couldn't do them. And so I think it would be very useful. And we've been talking today with some of the experts about trying to get the companies together so that we have educational opportunities to talk about this virus, does it get to the brain? Do we have to worry about it? The measurement of dystrophin, what's the best measure? And I think there's opinions about that best measure from FDA and from companies about how do you measure and how do you quantify? What does it mean? And how can we, and the other problem is that even if you do gene therapy and get dystrophin expressed and you see it in this muscle, it could be different in this muscle, right? So I think these are early days and lots of questions, but I hope in the next months and weeks we can have webinars that talk about exactly these things, about what does it mean to me, right? What does it mean to be about these viruses? What does it mean about the neutralizing antibodies and how to understand them? What does it mean, what do I have to think about in terms of expression and how to measure it and how can I understand it? And then obviously to speed up the process, because you're right, time is not on our side, and how can we move it quickly or as quickly as humanly possible? And I know all of these companies are working on supply of the virus, which is right now, I think Tim could speak to that as a person who knows virus in the oncology space. I think all of them are really working to get up to capacity so that when they get approved, they can treat all the people who are eligible for the therapy. So I think there's lots of work to do in education, and I promise you this isn't the last. We're going to do a webinar series to talk about these things and the measurement of dystrophin as you ask and other things. So you'll be kind of keep your ear to the ground on that. We're going to be doing it. And I wish that we could do it yesterday, and I wish that we had gene therapy yesterday and all of these other medicines to combine with gene therapy that enhances it. I know we're in a time crunch, so I don't know if anyone has any solutions, but to the degree that we can rush this safely, I think that we together as a community, I mean, just to go back to that first AdCom, you were a pretty powerful community at that AdCom. I think the FDA was like, holy cow, So we certainly know help and push, and we will, but I think we need the companies to help us think through. Going to speak to that? Come on, Ziva. You have a question, thought? Here's the last comment. Amanda, can you grab a mic?
I wanted to say that I think that there are things that you can push time. I don't know a lot about research. I'm not smart enough. And I believe that the drug companies, they're doing all they can to find cure to our kids, because honestly they have I'm excited, the words are slipping my mind. They have a goal to do that, and I believe that each research takes its own time. But I think that once a drug is approved, well, for instance, my son is on eteplirsen, and once it was approved, I was sure that the next day it'll be in our house and he'll receive it. And luckily for me, it took only, I don't know, almost 2.5 years. And I think that the drug companies must try to make those drugs approachable to us. Tali always tells me that they're not aiming for us to buy the drugs, but they should have those drugs approachable, I don't know, for the governments, for the insurance companies, and maybe not to be so greedy. I'm sorry if I'm rude. I honestly believe there will be a cure for Duchenne. I just hope that it'll be in our son's time time life. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks. Final comments. I hope and want it to be in time. And so it's up to all of us, the pharma companies, the clinicians who do the trials, the parents, the grandparents in this audience, the young men who lead us and guide us to make it in time. So to the degree that we can keep pushing, all of us, I thank you for that. I wish you success, all of you pharma companies. We wish you Godspeed and success. If there are ways that we, this advocacy community, can push for you, whether that's in a regulatory, and for all of us with international, Ziva's from Israel, we have people here from South America, and Enzo, and people who've moved to the US, not for the politics, but for the opportunity. We together have to push for answers as quickly as possible, and we will. So please know we're available to you. We're going to be harassing all of you to move faster, and Abby's going to be further harassing you to think about trial design that's faster, better. So thank you again. Kim's going to wrap this up, and it's time to party and take a breath. And when you get home, just remember all of us, and remember we'll have more opportunities together in the future. Thank you.